Mayor, at 6 o'clock, we're live.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this Tuesday, August 28th, City Commission Budget Work Session number 4 to order and ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Mayor Pam Triolo.
Here.
Vice Mayor Andy Amoroso is absent. Commissioner Scott Maxwell is absent for the role. Commissioner Omari Hardy.
Here.
Commissioner Herman Robinson.
Here.
If everyone would please rise for the pledge, led by Commissioner Robinson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Get Jackrabbit on that. He slowed down a little bit this time.
Before we get started, I would like to, if you would all join me in a moment of silence. If you noticed, we had the flag at half-mast over the weekend in honor and out of respect for Senator John McCain. So if we could have just a moment of silence, please. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. All right, we have our, of course, presentation, our Stantec presentation, our budget wrap-up overview. But before that, we have a presentation from Tom Copeland, the chair of the Financial Advisory Board. Come on up, Tom.
All right, coming on up. Hello, everyone. Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is my first time up here, so I've got to get everything right with the microphone and get situated here. I've seen other people foil at this. Could I get somebody to just load up a presentation? I actually have a PowerPoint right there. Would you mind real quick? Thanks. There's a PowerPoint up. In the meantime, my name is Tom Copeland. I'm the finance advisor. I've been on the Finance Advisory Board since 2014. I'm the interim chair of the Finance Advisory Board, and behind me is a couple of Finance Advisory Board members who I'd like to introduce here in a couple of minutes. But what we're going to be talking about tonight is the recommendations that the Finance Advisory Board has come to agreement on over the last couple of months. I am orderly and there we go. Perfect. Beautiful. Okay, so what I'd like to do at this time is just thank the commissioners for having us here tonight. We all feel that way. This is an important board. It's important work that we've done, and more importantly, we're proud of the work that we've done. We hope that you guys take these recommendations tonight and that they help and guide you in your decision-making process as you finish out the rest of the budget process. So I've got my little handy controller here. All right, fantastic. I'm going to open up with an overview of the Finance Advisory Board. And the Finance Advisory Board was created by ordinance in 2010. It comprises half of the Bond Oversight Committee, which is the committee that was established through the bond referendum that overviews the bond issuance, the road bond issuance. There are 7 members of the Finance Advisory Board, and there are 7 members of the Bond Oversight Committee who are appointed residents. We're all volunteer residents, just to make that point for the public. We're all volunteer residents for the city of Lake Worth. So we comprise half of the Bond Oversight Committee along with the 7 other appointed members. Our finance director is Mr. Bruce Miller, who is the new finance director for the city of Lake Worth. We're very happy to have you. Mr. Miller, thank you for joining us. I know it's been a process in making sure that role is filled, and we're excited to have you. Our board liaison is Corinne Elliott, who is here. This is Corinne Elliott right here. She's our board liaison. We meet for the public, and for the benefit of the public and the commissioners, we meet on the first Monday of every month. Right here in this room right here. Our current members are myself. Tonight we have Ben Ellis here as co-chair. We have Judith Just, who happens to be out of town. We have Sherry Smith right here as well. And is Karen Martin here? Karen Martin is not here, sadly. Karen Martin is also on our board. All right, so the mission and purpose of the Finance Advisory Board. This is written into the ordinance, and this is something that we've come to follow very closely. Mission and purpose is to promote transparency during the budget process. We also provide additional citizen input on major financial decisions impacting the city. And we advise the City Commission on the board's findings and recommendations. The third part is what tonight is all about. The presentation overview tonight, what we've done is we've reviewed 5 of the major critical funds that we've identified that we can make what we feel are meaningful recommendations on. Those are the refuse, water, electric, general, and beach funds. The way that we've presented and structured this presentation is that we're going to introduce the challenge that's been identified to us by city staff. We're going to introduce the recommendation that we have, and we're also going to provide a little bit of logic and consensus where it might apply for how we came to that recommendation. Another thing that's important for us to note that we're really proud of, 100% of our recommendations tonight that we are presenting were reached unanimously. Not just the ones that we're presenting, but all the recommendations that we came to. We thought that that makes a statement about how we're operating as a board that we wanted the commissioners and the public to know. So the sanitation fund, just going to jump right into the first fund. Our recommendation for the sanitation fund is to adopt the proposed 5% reduction in residential refuse collection rate. We've got a couple of reasons for this. Number one, we've identified it eases the burden, of course, on homeowners. The fund can absorb the financial impact, according to city staff. And those are the two main reasons for that. We've got a second recommendation for the sanitation fund. Let's make sure I don't get out of order. Let me follow it here. Which is to adopt the proposed 27% rate increase for commercial, industrial, and governmental. There's a couple of reasons for this as well that we've identified that we want to present to you. So first and foremost, lifting revenues are going to stabilize the future of the fund, which for any enterprise fund is something that's going to be important to this city going forward. It also allows for the acceleration of fleet maintenance and technology upgrades. So city staff already has a plan in place of how they want to use the proceeds that come from this rate increase. And rates are still below those charged in Boynton and West Palm, which are our immediate south and north neighbors, which I think is a really, really important thing for all of us to remember and for the public to know. 27% rate increase sounds like a whole lot, but we are not only competitive and in par with our neighbors, we're actually better than them. We're beating them on some of those rates. Depends on the days of service and when the days of service happen, but for the most part, we're lower than Boynton and West Palm, and in fact, a couple of other South Florida cities that were identified as well. All right, so I also, you know what? I actually jumped ahead a little bit without saying one thing. I did find out today because I had asked. This is super casual. I am absolutely open to conversations from this dais if you guys have any questions at all. So I just want to let you know that. Okay, so feel free to interrupt me. Don't feel shy about interrupting me.
Oh, we won't.
So with that, we're going to move into the water fund recommendations. Okay, so for this fund, we actually wanted to lay out what the key challenges were for you all to absorb. So the key challenge for the water fund that's been identified to us is maintaining current rate adjustments of 3% while maintaining capital improvement plan projects, goals, and targets. So that's kind of a twofold challenge, right? We need to maintain our rate stabilization that's charged to the residents, but also be able to fund and maintain those capital improvement projects that are coming down. With that, our recommendation for the water fund is to require that all capital improvement projects going forward over $1 million be debt funded. So all capital improvement projects over $1 million be debt funded. A couple of good reasons for this. Number one, we're in a favoring borrowing environment for water-related funds and capital improvement projects as they relate to water improvement plans. We can use what's called, for the benefit of the public, we can use what's called a state revolving funds. These are funds that are used for capital improvement projects for water, and they're at about 1%. So that's a pretty fantastic loan, and it creates an incentive for us to debt fund these projects. On that note, it reduces the reliance of funding these capital improvement plans using cash, of course. So that stabilizes the fund. It also ensures target reserves of 3 months and $8 million, 3 months or $8 million, the equivalent of $8 million, which has been identified by this commission as the target fund reserves. It ensures that that can be achieved. Okay? All right, so moving on. This next fund is it's a complicated one. And before we really jump into this, I just want to make a note on behalf of Finance Advisory Board and how we came to this part of the presentation. The electric fund is a complicated one. We all know that. There's a lot of moving parts. It is a fund that's incredibly important for us to be paying close attention to, as we know. Not only because it's a contentious issue, we've got the issues that we're dealing with infrastructure that's aging. We've got to deal with the financing of upgrading and maintaining that infrastructure. And frankly, this is maybe the most important enterprise fund that the city owns. It contributes a huge chunk back into our general fund reserves, which goes and finances the funding of city services. So this is an important fund. We really didn't feel like we could come up with anything that we could really latch onto that would be helpful to you guys, mainly because there's so much coming down the pike right now. Okay, we do have one recommendation though. Maybe not a recommendation, more of a memo of support. And what that is first of all, the key challenges. Obviously, the key challenges are the second tie line and improving system delivery reliability. So what we want to do is we want to stand here tonight to encourage the City Commission and we support you in your commitment to convene on a monthly basis to be having these conversations about the electric fund. We felt like that was a strong stance of support that we wanted you guys to have, because this is going to be a crucial time for the City of Lake Worth, as we all know. I know that's a talking point that we hear a lot, but it's true. We have a couple of reasons for this. Number one, there's $14 million in capital improvement project plans already underway for the electric fund. A lot of the public don't understand that, or maybe don't realize that. I know that that's a lofty, high-minded sentence. Maybe it's hard for the public to understand that, but that's important for us because we're in the middle of it already. We're already making some of these improvements. So being able to see those improvements through and making sure that that money is used is going to be crucial over the next couple of years. We also have the purchase power agreement coming down. And I just want to take a quick note to talk about the role of FAB. We've already got the Utility Advisory Board in place. They're fantastic. I've been to their meetings. I think a number of other FAB members have been to their meetings as well. We've got the right staff in place to manage the purchase power agreement. What we really want to look at is the financial implications of the purchase power agreement as it comes down going forward. So that's part of the, I'm sorry, was that on a timer or?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm halfway through. Am I okay, Madam Mayor?
Yeah, we're okay, because this is
Great.
it's a workshop.
So looking at the purchase power agreement strictly from the financing standpoint and how we can maximize the opportunities for financing that. We've been very encouraged by the staff, as you have, to what limited knowledge we've had in what's happening with the purchase power agreement, but it's looking like it's going to be very favorable for the city. The third thing that we wanted to point out is, of course, just reiterating that the electric utility is absolutely the most complex challenge that we face, but it's also a great opportunity as well. So we want to continue to encourage you guys to take on that commitment to the electric utility over the next fiscal year. Okay, so general fund recommendations. Sort of the same thing. The general fund has its own complex challenges, as we all know, but it's different. It's not an enterprise fund. It funds city services, the kind of services that all cities fund: police, safety, fire, culture, recreation. So it takes into some different considerations. Key challenge that we've identified here that we want you guys to think about over the next fiscal year is ensuring efficient delivery of high quality public services on limited resources. Of course, that's what we've been doing for years. Let's continue to do it. We do have a one recommendation that we felt very strongly on. I'm just going to preface this recommendation with saying that this is something that we spent quite a bit of time on, working through it. We have been to the meetings where this was, the workshops where this was represented, where this was presented, and we discussed it in Finance Advisory Board meetings at length. And what that recommendation is that we recommend we institute the comping class recommendations to bring all city employees to a $15 an hour minimum wage standard during fiscal year 2019. We have a couple of reasons for that. And we have a couple of recommendations that bolster that as well. So in addition to instituting the comping class study, we also would like to see, and we recommend that we institute the raises all at once, not by department or fund, for reasons that were discussed both inside prior workshops and also discussed at the Finance Advisory Board meetings. We felt that it didn't seem fair that one fund, just because it can absorb that fiscal impact, should be able to get a raise before another fund does. So we agreed we agreed on that recommendation. And on that point, at a cost of $600,000, the majority of it, over 50%, is actually earmarked for general service employees. So these are your general service public employees. Over half of that $600,000 that it would cost to implement this plan goes to them. And we think that's a good thing. This actually brings the city into medium range for competitive pay scales. So this brings us into the medium range across cities of our size and in Florida, which is an important thing for our future recruiting efforts of this city. And of course, the last thing is that this also creates a pay standard for the city's future employees as well. This creates a pay standard. This creates a benchmark that the city can lean on and work off of in future years. That is our main and strongest recommendation, I think. One of the strongest recommendations that this board came to during this process. Okay, moving on to beach, and then this is the last fund that we're making recommendations on tonight. So the beach fund recommendations, this is proudly an area that we also spent a lot of time on, and we came up with a number of recommendations, not just one or two. So we're pretty proud of these recommendations. We're excited to bring them to you tonight. Key challenge that we were working off of when we were coming up with a consensus on the beach fund is that we want to see the fund maintain target fund reserves with a balanced budget, but also be able to fund capital improvement project plans, as you guys know. Our first recommendation is going to be something that we felt very strong about as well. So the first recommendation is to review existing leases and complete a current market rent study at the beach. We have a couple of ways that we suggest this could be done. The city could hire a commercial appraiser or perform what's called a broker priced opinion. The idea here is that we look at comps that are beachfront retail and event hosting across the eastern seaboard of Florida and also the western seaboard of Florida. And the question becomes, what are other cities charging when they own beachfront property, beachfront retail, and event hosting property that they rent out? What are they charging, and where do we land on that scale? We also threw in the way that this could happen. So the way that this happens is that the commission here makes the referral to staff through a motion. Make the referral to staff through the motion to take a look into that and take that project on. We think that that was a really, really important thing. At the end of this presentation, I'm going to go into what it is that we're going to be looking at through fiscal year 2019, what the FAB is going to be looking at through fiscal year 2019. And this kind of plays into that. So I'll get a little bit into that in just a minute. Next recommendation. Though this is kind of moot because it's already done, we just did want to put in a memo of support for the $1 parking rate increase. We felt that this was an important step. It was the right step. We feel like it was the right thing to do. So we just wanted to throw that in there. We would like to make the recommendation, however, that the use of the proceeds be used to fund the capital improvement project up here, which you know, but only that, and also bolster our reserves as well. Helping to fund the capital improvement project at the pier and also bolster our reserves. Second recommendation is to implement the casino loan restructuring plan. This is kind of a wonky thing that's come down, but it has to do with the state saying that the current repayment plan that we're doing is not adequate. We need to redo it, which creates an opportunity for this commission. It creates an opportunity for the city to be able to implement a formal loan restructuring plan for the beach fund that does a couple of things. And the two goals that we would encourage you to look at is, number one, allowing for flexible repayments of the loan for that fund, and also adopting a fund balance policy that dictates how capital reserves are met and what portion of money that's earned goes towards capital improvement, capital reserves, and also repaying back, flexible repayment of the loan. This is something that Mr. Miller, Finance Director of the City of Lake Worth, has come to us and really kind of led the discussion on that. And we're confident that he knows what he's talking about and that this could be a really important thing for us to address, and also a great opportunity for the city too, to make sure that that fund lasts. We have the next recommendation for the beach fund being that we want to be here tonight to encourage the commissioners to prioritize further evaluations of redesigning the casino and parking. We just had the study come down. It was interesting. I know it generated a lot of public buzz. I know that's on the mind of our commissioners here tonight. And we just want to stand here tonight to encourage you to continue that conversation and continue that process. It's going to be a long one, no doubt about it. But it's going to be one that we think is a great opportunity to not only...
How long do you think it'll take?
What's that?
How long do you think it'll take?
Commissioner Robinson?
Well, I guess it depends on, it's going to depend on obviously the scope and scale of the project. I mean, that's where it's really going to come down to. You know, there was presentations made, and that's actually the next point I'm going to make. There was presentations given, conceptual designs given that range from $20 million to 60, you know? So I think it's going to depend on the size and scale. But I don't know. I'm not a city employee, so I don't know how long it's going to take. But we're here tonight to encourage you to continue that conversation.
Did you have a follow-up?
Based on 20 to 60?
Sorry?
Based on 20 to 60 million?
What's based on 2060 million?
Conversation.
No. Well, it's based on a whole lot more than that. But I'm just giving an example of how the size and scale of the project. Yes, no, size and scale. Forget 20 to 60 million. I mean, size and scale of it. Yeah.
Commissioner Hardy?
Thank you. The FAB recommended basically that we restructure the loans from the water capital and self-insurance funds, and that has implications for anticipated rate increases for our water utility customers. And I'm wondering, were those implications baked into the recommendations that we saw here? So you're saying that we should increase them 0.5% more than we would have otherwise.
I'm sorry, 0.5% of what more than we would have otherwise?
So if we don't repay the water fund, what the water fund is expecting to get repaid this year, which is several $100,000. Yeah, well, the whole piece is, but so if we don't repay the water fund at the rate that it's expecting to get repaid, we would have to raise water rates at a level to compensate for that. And my question is, was that baked into the recommendations that you
Right.
gave us for the water fund?
No, I understand. So we actually operated off the assumption that we are not raising rates at the water fund because that's been what's passed down from staff. That there is a 3%. There's the 3% increase in water rates. That is, what is that? Please, somebody help me out here. Is that part of the? That's like part of the ordinance or something? Or I think that's a target.
That was just what we had targeted.
Yeah, it's a budget. It's a budget target, right?
But when Stantec came and gave their presentation, the increase would have to go up to 3.5% in order to make sure that fund balance stays where, not fund balance, reserves, that we hit our target for reserves. And so, restructuring your loan has an implication either for water rates or for reserves in the water fund. And so, my question is, are those implications baked in to the recommendation here? Are you okay with us either raising rates more than we anticipated to raise rates at the water utility, or are you okay with us not building reserves the way that we had anticipated to build reserves? That's my question to you.
Sure. So I don't know that we got that deep into it. So I don't know that I can really give you an answer. I apologize. Or certainly not. I don't think I'd want to give an answer that doesn't reflect the entire FAB. But yes, we were operating under the assumption that 3% rate increases are expected for water. So we're operating under that assumption when we had that discussion.
Okay. All right.
Is there more?
Any other questions? Okay, great. All right, thank you for those questions. So, sorry, I lost my place. Yeah, okay. So, what we wanted to do was we wanted to, again, just a memo of support to prioritize this work. And there's a couple of reasons why. Number one that we came to is that there's some very reasonable concepts that maximizes the highest use of the beach property that were presented that night. Number two is that we actually do have a recommendation in preparation in the meantime, which is to formulate a plan to relocate city staff out of the casino. As we understand, there are some city staff in the casino. It's also being used for storage space. We want to recommend that the commission now begin that plan of processing to relocate that city staff.
Specifics on that?
Yeah, well, we understand that we don't know the number, but there's as many as maybe 7, we've been told, employees who work out of the second level of the beach casino complex. Obviously, when there's employees working out of there, there's going to be inter-service costs to do that, making sure that IT is there, all the things that go in running an office. And also, it's a concern that it's not the highest and best use of that space, obviously. And so that was something that the FAB had spoken about and that we felt was important to bring to you guys tonight. Again, just a plan to formulate some sort of a plan for addressing that.
Okay. That's what we're working
All good? Any follow-up? No? Okay. All right, so third thing, FAB. We just want to say tonight that FAB should be rigorously involved in the financial planning process of this. Again, keeping the focus of FAB to the financing of these projects is really the key message that we want to drive home tonight here with this commission, with the public, staying involved with just the financial planning parts of these great projects that we're embarking on with the city. All right, so that really concludes the presentations for the funds. Thanks for your patience through that. What we want to do is just end it tonight with a focus agenda that we've come up with. These are the things that the FAB wants to be focused on through fiscal year 2019. I'm going to run through these real fast. A couple of things. The first thing that we've agreed to is that we're going to take a deep dive into the beach fund as soon as we get back through after tonight at our next meeting. We're going to take a deep dive into the beach fund and looking at, again, the finances of the beach fund. We also want to take a deep dive into the Parks and Rec Fund. We did not get a chance. We have some members on our FAB who are really passionate about Parks and Rec, and we didn't get a chance to get into it just because of the limited time that we had for the process. And the process became, we ended up focusing obviously on some of these other recommendations. We didn't get there. We'd like to get there this year. We also want to plan, we also want to be part of the plan and implementation of the loan restructuring process for the casino complex that we had just spoken about. Looking at reviewing the financial implications of the comp and class study as that starts to come down the pike and as that starts to get implemented, being a part of that process just from the financial aspect and how it affects the different funds. Reviewing financial implications of the purchase power agreement, again, focusing on just the financial implications to the fund itself. Reviewing any new debt issuances for capital improvement plan. This was an area where we had actually heard, a number of areas we had heard from staff that they want to see FAB involved in on, which I'm proud to have been there for that. But this one in particular was something that was identified to us in our last meeting, that this is something that city staff would like to be able to rely on us for as a sounding board to be able to talk about some of these debt issuances, looking over the offerings and having some role in oversight on that. So we're excited for that as well, if that does come down this year. Also, the use of the penny sales tax proceeds, and we put when applicable on here because we don't know still exactly when that's happening. That's at the direction of the commission of when you guys are going to be taking that on. I assume that you will certainly be taking a look at that in fiscal year 2019. We'd like to be a part of that process as well. And then, of course, continue our work with the Bond Oversight Committee, which will last for the next couple of years while we get through phase 2 now of the bond road programs. So that's really our focus agenda for fiscal year 2019. And that concludes our presentation. What I'd like to do real fast, if I can, Madam Mayor, is just recognize our Finance Advisory Board members that are here tonight. Ben Ellis on the Finance Advisory Board, Sherry Smith on the Finance Advisory Board as long as I've been on it. She was there about a year before I was when I joined in 2015. So just want to take a moment to thank you guys for being a part of this process. Thank you, commissioners, for having us here. Madam Mayor, thank you for having us here. And we hope that we've said some things here tonight that are not only valuable and create some additional insight and some additional things to look at as you continue through the rest of the budgeting process. But also we're here to affirm and assert that we are your FAB. We are your Finance Advisory Board for the City of West Palm, City of Lake Worth. Please lean on us. Not City of West Palm. City of Lake Worth, please lean on us. We want to be a part of these processes going forward. And we look forward to working with you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Don't go away yet.
Okay, sure.
I didn't have my chance yet. Couple of things that I wanted to say. First of all, thank you very much for this great presentation. I'm really appreciative of it. To give you a little history, maybe before you even lived here, when you said it was established in 2010 in the beginning of your report, the actual Finance Advisory Board didn't start meeting until 2013 or maybe 14 even, because it had been put into place, but they never got, people left and they weren't given the ability. And one of the things that most of the people involved in the Finance Advisory Board wanted was a chance to be able to be a part, to oversee the budget and be involved in key decisions. So it was my hope when I got here a long time ago to get this board going. I think, Ms. Schmidt, you were my first appointee to the board.
I was right afterwards.
And you were too. No, that was even, this was the first time around
Yeah.
before we could get a quorum to be involved. So it's always been very near and dear to my heart to do it. So to have you doing a presentation here today makes me very happy to be part of it. I'm going to be a little tough on you though.
Sure.
And the way I'm going to be tough is that I want you less to think about policy, because I felt like a lot of the presentations today was about policy and your support of, which I'm very grateful for. But I want more, I want you guys to give me more numbers. I want you to have access to the numbers that you need through our finance director to get some of those things, because you know, when we talked about, there's going to be some discussions coming up, and I hope you'll watch them from our perspective. Like we talked about the $15 an hour, we talked about capital improvement projects. There are some things that are going to have to take a back seat. You're not going to meet your general fund, you're not going to meet your reserves if you're implementing this, this, and this. And we're going to have to see that. That's where I'm really going to need your help and your input. Do you know what I'm talking about? Those decisions that have to be made. In some of those instances that you gave, while supportive of it, we're still going to have to come up with decisions, and it's going to be really fine-tuning those numbers down to see what's going to be realistic for us to do that. And because you have the ability to do that, I'm anxious to see your work in some of those matters to see those numbers play out, because I want people I've always wanted this transparency process of it. I want people to see how the decisions are being made, why they're being made in this direction or this direction, how we have to come together to figure out a solution and do this, and what's going to have to give this year or the next year, or how we get to that process. And having you be an outside board other than as electeds, as us making those decisions, to see you grapple with them in some of the same ways that we grapple with them
Sure.
is kind of important.
May,
you know?
may I?
Yeah, please.
So, and on behalf of FAB too, by the way. So, I'm glad you mentioned that, Mayor, because I'm familiar with the history of FAB and the way that, it really just hasn't found its footing. This, of course, was the culmination of work that we were really able to get to and put together for you guys, really starting in April-ish.
Yeah, I know.
So, we took a step back, and I'm happy you mentioned this because I would like to kind of get this out in the public. I mean, we took a step back in April and we said, where are we at? What are we focused on? And we went back to the ordinance. With me as the chair. That's the first thing I did in the first meeting. Is I went back to the ordinance and looked at the language of the ordinance and what does the ordinance say? What can we get done based on the ordinance in this short amount of time that we have prior to August? So that's a function of what we focus on. So tonight's presentation was really just a focus on it was a function of what we were able to focus on and what we were able to come together on, without getting into too deep of the weeds. But I really appreciate your concern in making sure that we are getting into those weeds. And we certainly have a whole fiscal year ahead of us. So we are very excited to do that. And, really tonight's presentation was about reasserting the FAB
No, I'm
and that the FAB is here.
hello. I
Yeah,
am
exactly.
very, very
Exactly.
and I'm very, very grateful.
Exactly.
I just want to make sure that we're sitting down. I want to make sure, I know in the past years, we've had some complications because people didn't feel they were getting the numbers that they needed or the information that they need. So I want to just make sure that, that we're all communicating and that everyone's working on the same page. We have a new finance director, and Corinne's always been our tried and true, helping us get through everything and so helpful in it. But I think we've got a good team all around here, and I'm very pleased. I want you to make sure that you have this stuff, and that when we're grappling as a city, we're grappling as a city. Obviously, we'll come up with the policy decisions, but I want the process, and I know I just said this, but I just want the process to be so transparent that people can feel what we're going through as a city and be a part of that and be a part of the solution. And I think that you have a very good opportunity to do that in your capacity, and that's what I've always craved and was always missing. We got that from Electric Utility Advisory Board, where we're going through certain changes, and we've gotten that through other boards. Now it's your turn. So I'm
Great.
here for you, and I'm grateful for you. Thank you. Commissioner Robinson?
I thank you and all the board volunteers that put in a lot of time and study on it. I appreciate the recommendations of cooperation, lacking a little specificity in options that we know we need to address. So too many options are not good either.
Sure.
But I look forward to specifics on how to address some of the problems.
Yeah, and if I may, you made a great point there. So, looking at the options, we kind of thought about that as well. And the way that this presentation was structured tonight was to come with you guys after we had also looked at the same options you guys had, and we came with a strong recommendation. So I appreciate that because you're right, there are a lot of options out there.
I'm just, it's unusual to have so much agreement.
I know, he's shocked. No, he fell over in his chair. Just
Well,
give me that chance.
it must mean that we're in agreement, which is good.
That's always
But we still have issues to solve, and
Yeah.
we need specific ways to do that.
And we took a lot of time with this too. We didn't just. This does look like a lot of agreement, and I get that there's an implication there, of potential. I don't know. It may look like we're just signing off on stuff, but we have spent 4 meetings in August, 3 meetings in July, 2 or 3 meetings in July, and these are long meetings. So just to put it out there, that we appreciate that you appreciate how much time we could put into this, and yeah, these weren't just rubber stamps. I mean, these are stuff that we really spent a lot of time on. So thank you.
We don't expect you to rubber stamp.
Yeah.
The golf course, and I'm glad underutilized assets that we have, the casino building, the waterfront, the golf course is a financial interest. I'm looking forward to maximizing our assets. And the tourist dollar, whether they're golfing or swimming in the ocean or swimming somewhere else in Lake Worth,
Why would you swim
is-
anywhere else other than Lake Worth?
is
What are you all
is
crazy
something
going
that
anywhere?
we look forward to input on.
Well, thank you. We're looking forward to getting to the Parks and Rec funds as well. So thank you for that.
City manager, you have a light? I didn't know that they gave you one.
Somebody, they kept taking my batteries, but
I
I
don't
got
even
stole
have a light. He's
I
got a
took
light.
somebody else's. Yeah, I took Andy's. I just wanted to say, and your comments, Mayor, about what you and I'm sure the rest of the commission would really like to see the Finance Advisory Board, the areas that get into, especially with this next cycle coming up. We have some time to
Now
plan.
you actually have time to do it.
But more importantly, I want to thank the volunteer members, and I saw Karen come into it. There's been other people who've been on the FAB. And part of their difficulties has stemmed from on the organization side. It's been difficult for us to match them up with the resourcing of staff. Corinne has done, and Maria, they've done a yeoman's job, but they've been doing 1,000 other things as well. And the difficulty in this organization over the past several years has been the cycling of finance directors. It's been difficult to find or keep. I think with Bruce coming on board, there's going to be a new era of that, getting this board its corresponding department director so that you can do the job as directed by the mayor and commission, and have a substantive relationship and not feel like either the organization is for some reason not paying attention to you or doesn't want to pay attention to you. It's been very difficult, and I apologize for that. But I think the stars are starting to align, and we're getting the staff up to full complement. I know that the workload will be distributed a little better in finance, and we've got a few more positions to hire. But I just wanted to throw that into the mix. We completely understand the desire of the mayor and the commission and the desire of the board, and I think the organization is now finally getting up to the level of matching that. So I'm really hopeful for the relationship. And you talk about transparency. We're transparent. We throw numbers out. People will give them, but the problem is these numbers are very complicated and complex. And in transparency, it's meaningless if people don't understand what these numbers mean. And this board here has the ability, as an extension of the citizens that you appoint, to go in and look at these very complex operations and make sense of them in a way that builds trust. So it's not just staff or some remote consultant. And so they serve that important part of the process in transparency by actually making it open and understandable. So I just wanted to add those comments to kind of, from my perspective, the difficulty I've had in trying to find finance directors for this organization. I think we've finally gotten to a point of stability and competency and respect as an organization to recruit and keep top-notch leaders. And we can talk about the organization. If you don't have the leadership at the top doing the job that you're starting to see these folks doing, we won't get to where we need to be. And so for the first time, I'm fully staffed at department directors. I didn't even know what this feels like. It's wonderful. So welcome, Bruce, and the folks that have been in finance for a while that's been helping out. That's the perspective of the organization, and just wanted to throw that in there.
And
It's an
thank you,
exciting
Pam.
time to be in Lake.
It's exciting.
Thank you, Tom.
You're very welcome. And if I just may end, because I did promise Ben Ellis that we would do this, that Finance Advisory Board meetings happen on the first Monday of every month.
That was
So
an
please
advertisement.
come out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job. All right, moving on to item 4, Stantec presentation. My favorite person in the universe, Eric. All right, next to my husband.
Bruce, are you guys going to come up here for questions, or you might as well jump the bench now?
You know what, and you might as well also grab that microphone there, so if you have any questions, we can hear you and we can do all that.
Are those magnolia leaves?
Those are outside City Hall.
Yeah, magnolias, right?
Yes, sir.
I wish I knew more to answer that accurately.
Just say yes.
Yes,
That's
sure.
it, this presentation's over.
Where's Dave McGrew?
Can't answer that question, you're done.
Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Eric Van Malsen, once again from Stantec. Leticia couldn't be with us tonight, but I should be able to take care of the presentation. As a brief agenda, we're going to review the project scope once again and then go through a few of the funds that we did not review the last time we were here. This includes the water fund, the regional sewer, which there's not a whole lot to talk about, but it does affect the local sewer fund, which we'll talk about next. The stormwater fund, and we'll revisit the previously presented funds, the electric, sanitation, beach, and general fund, to finalize our recommendations and our analysis, and then go into a discussion and interactive models as needed. And of course, you guys run the show. If you want to pause on the individual funds and review any scenarios, I'd be happy to do so.
Thank you.
As a brief review of the project scope, our job this year was to update each fund's multi-year financial management plan with the latest customer demand and property assumptions, or the projections from your staff, operating cost needs, and capital and renewal replacement needs for each fund. Our task or key issues for each fund is ensuring compliance with the existing and any new debt service covenants. And some of these funds, you'll see that we are recommending borrowing to fund the future capital improvement program costs, and then ensuring compliance with the reserve target policy for each of the funds. We also, as a major overarching task of ours, to evaluate each funds for the revenue sufficiency and sustainability of the planning period, which is our 10-year forecasting period. We're going to go into the water fund first, and changes since the previous workshop when you saw this a few months ago was the added estimated pension costs of approximately $37,000 in 2019 and beyond, modified transfers to the general fund to match the general fund's budget and maintain the same level of the transfer throughout the projection period. And then we modified the transfers from the beach fund to match the beach fund's current budget. This is the control panel of our water fund, and I'll make sure the call-outs are pointing of the important areas. For one, we are recommending the 3% rate adjustment for the water rates annually going forward, and the entire 10-year plan relies upon a 3% annual rate adjustment. With the 3% rate adjustments, you meet your reserve target in each of the years of the projection period. In the out years of the projection period, we show that there will be potentially ample reserves to cash fund the steady state capital improvement projects that we have projected out there. But you will notice that in that left bottom graph, the early years of the CIP rely upon or need a lot of investment into the system, and then it stays out in those out years. To the extent that that forecast holds true and the plan is to spend that little out in the future, you could potentially cash fund it all with reserves. However, we do show in the next 2 years, that's a bundled debt for fiscal year 2019 to 2020, that there may be borrowing required to fund that early slug of capital improvement program. In the, if I can get my mouse to hover over here, you can see in 2020, 21, and 2019, our model is suggesting borrowing for a hunk of your capital improvement program for the water fund. And then each of our funds that suggests borrowing, I like the concept that the previous presentation made of consider borrowing for all projects over $1 million. To the extent you could bundle these debt issuances, that would help to consolidate them. And of course, we maintain our projection of strong projected debt service coverage of your existing debt and any potential new debt going forward, well above a 2.0 threshold, which is a very good sign for this fund to cover it under a 3% rate increase. Any questions from the water fund before I move on?
Commissioner Hardy?
Yes, can we talk about the implication that restructuring the loan at the beach fund would have on this fund
Right, and when we looked at this many months ago,
for either rates or
I
reserves?
believe we looked at what if the loan was entirely forgiven and no future
Yeah, we did.
That's
no
not what I
future
had
debt
in
service
my
payments was paying back to the water fund. That's what caused this to go to 3.5%.
Okay.
If it was somewhere in between, of course, that level of needed rate increase would be mitigated. But also, the way our model works, it would essentially flow into the cash flows and probably just show you're going to need to borrow more in a few years to fund your CIP if you don't get that much. You could still probably maintain a 3% rate increase if that loan is restructured in any given way. But if it was forgiven entirely, that's where we were looking at the 3.5% rate increases.
Okay, so the restructuring that was presented to us, do you have that in your presentation in the?
No, we've not discussed any sort of restructuring of the loan, or I don't know if anything has been finalized or a recommendation for how it could be restructured as of yet.
Did staff give Stantec the loan restructuring that we discussed in our workshop about the beach?
I think we talked about it then, but I'm trying to remember exactly what the direction was from the commission. We still have to bring back the language of that loan agreement, which is something that Bruce is working on, and I don't want to speak for you, Bruce.
Do you have an update, Bruce?
But
Yeah, to add to that, the sense that at least I received was that we wanted to do a little bit more analysis. So I'm doing 3 types of structures, if you will, whereby, if full forgiveness to a much a longer payback, a lower interest, trying to find a different combination of possibilities that the council could then discuss and then approve.
Okay.
So therefore, there's nothing in this because we didn't have any finite or definitive direction relative to, that outcome.
Okay.
But the outcome would be 3 to 3.5%, basically, in that swing
It'll be a range.
range.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Robinson?
I guess we're still talking about the debt, and we haven't done a whole lot of talking about income, and except for raising the parking rates. We have an underperforming asset in the building and in a waterfront property that I think we somehow need to set a policy to focus on income.
Agreed, sir, and we'll talk about that in our regular commission meeting, but let's just get the budget done. We're at the budget point right now, we have to conclude these numbers at this point, so we've got to move
To
on to the
get
next. To get to making
under-
a profit
well-
there, yeah, or actually covering our expenses.
And then
And
next
beyond.
year, I'm afraid, I hope we won't be talking about just the debt.
Agreed. City manager?
no, I just was going to say, we're going to cover the beach fund
Yes.
later, so we can be a little more honed in those conversations
Okay.
there.
Sounds good. Moving on.
Moving on to the regional sewer fund, our update shows that with continued increases in the pass-through costs from the ECR, which this directly affects your local sewer fund. Compared to our prior study, you can see going into fiscal year 19, we're showing almost a $750,000 increase in that cost. That grows a little bit into the next year, then grows substantially in fiscal year 2021. So essentially, the large costs that are coming passed through to your regional fund are going to affect your local sewer fund in a manner that we've previously presented and I'm not going to walk to just now. So changes since our prior workshop included the adjustment for the estimated pension costs, and as the same with the water fund, we modified the transfers to match the general fund's budget and maintain that at the same level throughout the projection period. So for the local sewer fund, what we are showing is a recommended rate adjustment. Whereas last year we were showing 5% rate adjustments every year of the projection period, we're now showing an early increase to 7.5% through fiscal year 2021, down to 3% in fiscal year 2022. But it's important to note over the 10-year projection period, this plan of rate increases, while a little bit heavy early on and lower in the out years, does show savings to the average ratepayer over the 10-year projection period versus last year's recommendation of 5% annually. This would also require borrowing for this fund to fund its needed capital improvement program over the next few years. However, the borrowing combined with the rate increases do show that we would maintain our 3 months reserve target throughout the projection period.
So what you're saying now, so we're gonna move from the projected, we were looking at a 5% increase all the way out, right? I can't
Right.
see with your, I'm sorry, with your
Yeah,
bubbles.
when we looked at this last year, our recommendation, and then all those green bars assumed a 5% annual adjustment to the sewer rates. Now we're showing with earlier needs in the capital improvement program that are hitting a little bit harder than our projected period of last year. If you looked at this bottom graph, you can see those green bars are substantially lower in these early years compared to the blue bars. So the needed capital improvement programs for the fund will require a quicker initial investment in terms of rate adjustments to those 7.5%, but just for 3 years, and then can be dropped down to 3% and potentially lower in these out years where we're showing a buildup of reserves. And despite that early recommendation of a higher rate adjustment from 5 to 7.5%, you do show over 10 years, your average ratepayer would be paying about $2 less in their monthly bill than we were recommending that this time last year.
So it's needed for the capital improvement projects in the 3-year period, is that what it is?
Yes, that's the biggest need we see as a driver for an increased rate adjustment in these early years, is a higher level of capital improvement spending that's being projected for the fund.
I'm just much more inclined to a smooth, but
Right, we try to look at a smoother projection, but unfortunately, it would cause you to dip below your 3-month target in those early years. If we put in a lower smooth out, you would recover those reserve balances in those out years, but particularly considering the fact that we are showing the need for borrowing, and I believe your staff is can have to consider the borrowing. We would have to show a healthy fund that has the adequate revenues to maintain a minimum reserve threshold of 3 months and the debt service coverage ratios that is going to be required to support the new bond issue.
so just saying. I'm sorry. If you put it, can we play with this model?
Sure.
You tell me when. It's what this is for. That's why we have this model.
Madam Chairman, you just.
Just to add to that while he's loading up,
Julie,
think
introduce
it's on.
yourself.
So,
hi, sorry, Julie Parham, Assistant Water Utility Director.
hello.
Madam Mayor and Commissioners, just to kind of add on to that, what Eric was talking about is we've seen a huge spike in costs from the regional sewer. As he mentioned, the capital improvements at ECR, the wastewater facility that we're a shared owner of, that's a big part of what's causing the big spike right now. They have $100 million in bonds to fund a biosolids project, another $50 million in consent order work that's going on, and that's what gets passed through and why local sewer has seen a big increase too.
3 years ago, we had discussions. We went to the meetings. We went there, and it was supposed to lower the rates for us as participating members. It hasn't lowered anything for us. It's increased our rates exponentially, and it's causing us to make a hike in a short amount of time. I mean, can we do anything about this? Are there any other choices?
Well, Madam Mayor, you may be getting it confused with the regional sewer program, not the ECR. And just so everybody understands, the ECR is the big facility that was created after the 70s water laws were passed. We were used to dump the sewer offshore. It goes to a big facility up in West Palm Beach, West Palm, Riviera, Palm Beach, and the county. And
No, I am talking about the ECR.
Well, they've been talking about $100 million program for a long time, which was going to ramp up our capital costs.
Right, but we also negotiated it back. They were going to do this one program, and then they decided to do the separate one, which
it-
would have cost less the amount of
It
capital.
was reductions and increases, which, yeah, I mean, Julie, you
And
can,
there have been
exactly.
more recently.
Is that an
than-
oxymoron?
It sounds weird.
There've been more consent orders recently
Where's Brian?
due to quality of the wastewater that's at ECR and that has been used for reclaimed water. So there've been consent orders and new projects that must get done now per DEP's consent decrees on them. So that's why they had to
We
borrow
could use
another.
an update, I think, is what would be
Oh, without a
appropriate.
doubt.
And so you can be
You
brought
know,
up to, yeah.
We
it's-
were trying to be proactive 3 years ago to try to not have to deal with these kinds of increases in the short term and to keep us on a even keel. So we were looking at that 5% just last year when we were doing this.
Yeah, and I failed to recount my previous slide of the regional sewer fund, which showed substantial increases over our prior year projection over the next 3 years, which is contributing to this need of the higher rate increase.
That's what I just wanted to double check that. Yeah, because I'm just
But I'm prepared to show you what we mean by needing these early rate
I
increases.
just wanted to get to
Yeah.
the bottom of like, it's not just our projects or it's not in conjunction
No,
with
no,
the,
no.
I mean, this is,
This is a little
the
bit
ECR.
of yeah.
okay.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save our current plan to last, so you'll see any change I make to this model and how they affect the difference between the blue and the green bars. So this is our 7.5% for 3 years, followed by 3% afterwards. I'm going to go ahead and put 5% in here to just to show you the effect of a levelized 5% plan going forward. As I calculate this model.
Yeah, I was looking at to do 5% for 5 years.
Yeah, so as you can see, reserve balances would dip well below your
Gotcha.
3-month threshold in this middle part of the projection period, which will be a major caution for any rating agency once you go out for any future debt. And we could lower your capital improvement program substantially, but I still think you would need this early increase because of the ECR issues.
I totally get it now. Okay. I just wanted to see it. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Just to add on one more thing, I mean, after this big spike at ECR with the capital projects, it should level out and we'll have reduced disposal costs over at Solid Waste Authority, which will save millions a year. So there is still that out there that it should decrease in a couple of years once these major large projects get completed.
What other, I know that we're part of this. It's us, Palm Beach, Riviera Beach,
Palm Beach County.
Palm Beach County,
West Palm Beach.
West Palm.
West Palm Beach.
So what do the other people participate, how do they take care of it?
The,
The other cities that aren't?
well, we have a group of cities that we collect for in
Right.
this sub-regional system, or this regional.
So there's just the one system.
And there's 7 of those. So there's really only one system that controls the sewer processing at the facility, and that's the board we sit on.
Okay.
It's-
I've got questions, but not for this meeting.
Well,
This
we
is
should
fine.
come back and do
Yeah,
some
I'd like
follow-up,
to
more
do a
detail.
follow-up. Yeah, and I want the ECR here. You know, we're a member of it. We deserve an annual update, let alone a quarterly update, but something like
Certainly,
that.
and-
Because
Brian's the chair of it too.
with these expenses, you know, I think the citizens of this community need to hear firsthand what's going on and what projects are happening. Commissioner Robinson, microphone.
Can we raise the fee that we charge to pass through the sewer? I mean,
Well, not,
that's our fee.
not here.
Not here. Yeah.
This is what the local is, the Lake Worth system for Lake Worth residents and businesses. Then there's the other system.
regional.
Which, is that gonna come up next, or?
Oh,
y'all-
We kind of passed.
The question was, can we raise that rate by ourselves?
There's a
Can
process.
look into renegotiating that. It was just agreed upon back in 2013,
That
but we
was 5
can
years ago.
revisit
But-
that.
But their impacts related to these capital projects, that their share, so to speak, of it from us back, their board that we created, that we work with, covers that pass-through of expenses. So we're not subsidizing anybody else's sewer, if you're thinking that.
Correct.
And we can't increase our income by charging more.
You do in a sense, but it's a true up every year to kind of charge the exact cost
Okay.
by member based upon their demand and use of the facility.
The other question is when have we used an emergency reserve to any great extent? When was the last time we needed the reserve to?
I can't speak to when you would use your reserve down below your minimum target. We monitor how this fund is related to its minimum 3-month reserve target, which is at the bottom end of the good area of reserves you want. You need to have those on hand for a local
And
sewer
Eric made
fund.
the point earlier that that's something that the rating agencies, when you're looking at borrowing money, they look at that.
Yeah.
But we haven't borrowed, we're good with borrowing because our capital improvements aren't
But if
coming
you
up
look at this fund and we're projecting I can't see the numbers,
in
2020.
In 2020.
Yeah, they're
Right.
gonna be looking at that.
But this is showing that would be a bundled debt issue over the next 3 years of needed funds to fund your CIP. So that's not necessarily in 2020 funding only projects in 2020. That's a bundled debt issuance that would fund multi-years of projects. And to issue that debt and receive favorable rates, you're going to need to show adequate reserve balances, which is a typical recommendation of 2 to 6 months. We've targeted 3 months for this fund. You're going to need to show adequate debt service coverage in your financial projections, which we monitor in this fund, and that assumes our projections would assume these rate adjustments were to occur, and you would maintain these reserve balances with those rate adjustments.
business to do it that way.
Go ahead. Commissioner Hardy?
No, I was just gonna say, we use the reserves every time we borrow. Yeah, so,
It was the cost of doing
It's-
business, I
yeah.
understand. I just don't like having one choice
Right.
and being stuck with those choices. So yeah, we need an update. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'd like to reiterate for your utility rate adjustments to be sure that those are correctly advertised on the utility bills as every year. It's just something I want to remind the city of.
Okay. And that's a pass-through. It's not from our project.
Right.
Yes.
Stormwater Fund. Changes since the previous workshop included the estimation of adjusted pension costs. Same with the other funds. We modified the transfers to match the general fund's budget and adjusted the rate increases from 3.25% to 3.5% starting in fiscal year 2020 due to increased transfers to the general fund and pension costs. So we are showing a recommended no rate adjustment for fiscal year 2019, but beginning next year, a 3.5% rate adjustment may be required if this capital improvement program holds true, which is very heavily loaded in those early years, and it does use up the reserve balances that have is currently in the bank for the stormwater fund to pay for a lot of those projects. But it still does show that a needed borrowing is about in the same timeline as those rest of the funds, so you do not eat up those reserve balances to the full extent of your minimum threshold, which in this fund is 12 months. But since it's a small fund, that's not a large amount of dollars, about $1.75 million. Particularly for a stormwater fund in the hurricane belt, you want to have adequate reserves of about 12 months. And particularly the size of the fund, the pure dollar amount for 12 months is not that substantial. But going forward, there will be cash flow deficits that will need to be corrected eventually with either inflationary-like increases like we're showing right here, or holding off and producing a larger level of increases in the out years of the projection period. But for fiscal year 19, we're recommending no action and no adjustments to the stormwater rates.
No, I always like that. No increases always look good to me. But when you look at a projection out, I mean, I know it's gonna be consistent at 3.5 year out, year out. Does it change any if you put a small increase in for next year?
It would, but given your level of reserves right now and the capital improvement program that you have over the next 5 years, I feel very comfortable in the next 5 years. If you just start inflationary level increases next year, you'll be able to keep this fund whole. Because we're only showing caution in year 7 or 8, 9, and 10, I would not recommend you diverting from the recommended plan from your staff just to concern with the years 8, 9, and 10 just yet.
Okay.
We as Stantec would start throwing up the red flags if we think you need it right now.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Any other questions for the Stormwater Fund before we move on to electric? Since the previous workshop, just a few weeks ago, we've updated the electric sales revenue based upon staff's internal projection and updated the 2018 forecast and 2019 proposed budget with some new data provided by staff. It includes new projected annual purchase power costs based upon staff's expectation of the ongoing contract negotiations, and includes the compensation study results and further budget adjustments by staff. It includes updated CIP spending, in which $2.1 million was pushed out of fiscal year 2019, which pushes the initial projected borrowing out to fiscal year 2020. So what we are showing here is the fund with lean reserve balances right now, but even with no rate adjustments going forward, the cost savings significantly on the purchase power agreement will cause a potential surplus that would build up reserve balances by fiscal year 2020. And as the current projection shows right now, we would maintain those reserve balances at the minimum thresholds throughout the entire projection period with no rate adjustments. It does assume that the projected CIP is going to be substantial in these early years and would require an amount of borrowing around fiscal year 2020 that would be needed to fund the ongoing CIP for this fund. But as of now, with what we know about staff's estimate of the purchase power adjustments, this fund can sustain itself without rate adjustments in the near term or in the projection period as we understand it currently.
gonna be good to be in the banking business in 2020.
Any questions on the electric fund?
Making up for 40 years.
No major adjustment to our recommendation as of from the few weeks ago.
It's not all the adjustments, all the pension adjustments and all the stuff has been factored in?
Yeah, all that's accounted for, and most of the recent adjustments we received are one-time costs, not ongoing and recurring that would cause a real deviation in the cash flow projection we were showing right there.
The only thing we may do is in either the first quarter or second quarter, come back with any adjustments that we feel are necessary based on the results of the negotiated contract, which Ed's in the middle of that and won't be completed, executed, implemented, and up and running January. So this is covers everything, and it's a little conservative in some areas, and we're very confident about it. They've done a good job.
Starts to bounce in 19 and goes back up to in 20.
And to put this in the context, just like when we grappled with the issue of the roads, of the water, the sewer, the drainage, think of the wires and the distribution system and the equipment that Ed and his group is responsible for as infrastructure. You're now catching up for 40 years of sort of benign neglect. And it's painful to look at, but we're going to fix it.
Excellent, thank you.
Right.
Are we gonna do that through a revenue bond, or, how are we gonna borrow?
We'll bring back the ideas on how to do that, but it would most likely be in the form of revenue, yes.
Okay.
Right.
Nice to see, thank you.
Moving on to the sanitation fund, just as a recap, we've this is not actually changes since the previous workshop. That's kind of a mislabel. We've already shown you this, which includes the adjusted fee schedule, which reduces the residential fees by 5% and increases the commercial fees by 27%. We've received some updated adjustments to the proposed budget and forecast and updated CIP spending. We are showing the adjustments to the residential and commercial rates in fiscal year 2019, and it shows a sustainable fund with no further adjustments required going out to maintain your reserve balances. As you can see, those reserve balances start to decline in those out years, which will eventually need to be corrected. But given the level of spending in the 5 to 10 year period, we feel like you are going to have adequate revenues to fund your ongoing needs.
Talking trash.
Beach fund. This is, again, not a change since the prior workshop. That's a mislabel. This is the same as you've seen since the prior workshop. We have seen some minor adjustments to the budget from staff recently, but the results are essentially the same, to where while the $1 hourly rate adjustment provides for a significant revenue boost to the fund, which provides for sustainable cash flows throughout the projection period. And we do lower, as discussed last time, our assumption of growth in the parking revenues year over year. We showed 2% last year. Now we're showing 1% to assume some sort of elasticity to the raise of the parking rates. Despite that, you have a substantial cash flow surplus projected over the next few years that will build up the reserve balance and hopefully provide some adequate funding for additional capital improvements for the fund.
Well, last time we only gave Larry 2 days, I think, to figure out if there was any increase in the parking. Have you had any better information since then, Lauren? You knew we were going to ask you. Yeah, I think that we had just changed their, was it like 2 days that they got it working or something like that?
Good evening, Lauren Bennett, Assistant Director of Leisure Services. So I now have just about a month's worth of data, and Larry ran the numbers for us this month. So for the month of August, at $3 an hour, we're at $154,000. If we were at $2 an hour, we'd be at $103,000. So we're seeing quite a jump with the parking increase. And just keep in mind that we had a lot of rain for the month of August as well, and we're still seeing such a jump in the numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Tourist dollars.
We tortured you the last time you were here, so I just figured I had to call you back up again and see if the numbers changed.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Hardy?
Sorry, yeah, I was also interested in like the underlying unit demand. So have people changed their behavior at all?
So
Right.
we're not seeing any behavioral patterns change.
Okay.
And I'm not seeing anybody pull up, go to the meter, and then say, nope, I'm leaving, and then turn around.
Okay.
Staff
So-
is actually watching that very closely.
So, like, the number of hours paid for, we've seen no dip in that. Okay. Do we, so what you're saying is that we track that
Yeah.
also? Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. All right.
Moving on to the final fund, the general fund. We've adjusted some of the minutia of the budget based upon some updated estimates from staff and adjustments to the budget. And our new projection does include the Combat Class study, which we showed you last time was a little bit better off in terms of the projection than this. But with the Combat Class study now, here's our results. We're showing no assumed adjustments to your millage rate, strong property value growth in those early years, but the initial cash flow deficits coming into fiscal year 19, which is less of a deficit than last year. It's just shy of $500,000 projected for fiscal year 19. That deficit would decline over the next few years to where cash flow would break even somewhere around fiscal year 21 and 22 if growth holds strong and the budget can be adequately maintained in terms of increases year over year at a moderate rate. Your reserve balances could, in a projection, increase beyond your 2-month reserve target by the end of our projection period. But my caution would be for this fund is particularly with the effect of the homestead legislation we project to pass over this November, that result is imputed in here as soon to be passed in the lost ad valorem revenue associated with it.
So you factored that $25,000 hit?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And
Thank you for doing that.
yeah, and my big caution with this fund is while those deficits are declining, do everything you can going into next year to execute the budget under budget like you typically do. The staff has typically come in a little bit under budget each year, and that makes for the end of year projection slightly better than where we would start right now. But also to just manage those budgets as best as you can to make it so those reserves don't deplete any further down below that target, so they can be recovered up to that 2-month target sooner than later.
Now, have we factored in on the general side the increased housing? You know, I know we factored it into, say, electric usage and other funds. Have we factored it into the general fund?
Yes, we've adjusted our growth expectations for not only property values, but that really affects other areas of revenues that would be affected by growth, such as your state shared revenues, local shared revenues, local citations, things that may be impacted by population or new development. We've increased those to the same levels as our other funds.
That's what I meant, the new
But
development.
they're much those kind of revenues that may adjust slightly with higher levels of growth. They all play a much larger percentage of this fund than, say, ad valorem revenues and receipts do. And then from our perspective, you're gonna see a good level of revenue growth over the next few years as long as the economy doesn't crash. Our big worry with this fund is just to manage expense growth.
Thanks, now you jinxed us.
That's why I knocked on wood.
And there's nothing we could do to say, here's how you would prepare for that. We would not recommend, jacking up your millage rate to 10 just to prepare for an eventual recession. Manage that as it comes. But
Be responsive.
as long as this city is growing to the extent that your staff is projecting it to, our biggest concern would just be managing expense growth within the general fund to make sure those deficits get eliminated over the next few years and potentially give you a surplus to build reserves over the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you.
Can-
Mr. Robinson?
Do we have a number on the step backwards if the homestead?
Yes, sir.
exemption,
I believe it's $232,000.
What was, I didn't want to say.
We've calculated, based off of a projection in fiscal year 2020 when it would be implemented, approximately $334,000 of lost ad valorem revenue every year.
300.
334.
And that's an independent evaluation we perform based upon your actual property data and the current level of homestead exemptions that are in the property database now. If that level were to grow by the 3% cap on their property values over the next 3 years, that would be the effect in 2020.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if now's the time, but can we use that number from now until November to talk about how important that vote is going to be?
Oh, in regards to
The-
getting out
the-
the vote with the
The homestead
the
vote?
homestead change, yeah.
Yeah.
The city's gonna be
I mean,
amazing.
Yeah, and every city I consult with, and this is my bread and butter, general funds, and we've been preparing around the state for this eventual passage. It affects certain funds greater than others. There's a lot of different cities that have more properties jammed into that increment than others. But it's something every city I know of is trying to educate their citizens about, because particularly as ones we've come in and done this independent evaluation, if they're sustainable right now and we turn that homestead exemption on, they may quickly become unsustainable with cash flow deficits that would not be overcome without significant changes to their either revenues, of course, the millage rate, or any of their budget adjustments going forward on the expense side. I know cities that are planning on an immediate response in terms of a millage rate increase to immediately offset it. They're trying to let their citizens know if this thing passes, we're going to have to respond because it's affecting our budget. We can't just lay off our staff because the state has given you the ability to give yourself a homestead exemption. So I would encourage you to educate your citizens about how it's going to affect your city and lost revenues, how it may impact your general fund.
Thank you. Amen.
With that, that's the end of my presentation. I'm open to any other questions or conversations.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. Thank you, staff. Good job.
If you think education's expensive, try ignorance of what it'll cost you if you weren't educated.
Well, it's going to cost, you move it from one column, we'll move it from column A to column B, and guess what? It still costs you money, so.
Absolutely.
That's the key.
And unfortunately, it's a little bit like asking your kids to vote on if they're going to eat their vegetables for dinner.
Yeah, I know.
Can all kind of predict the answer to that.
I'm sure.
I like broccoli.
Well, at this moment, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
No,
I'm sorry. Did I miss something?
there's a staff.
Oh, staff, budget wrap-up overview.
They're going to do a budget wrap? Did I hear that?
Before I let the mic go, I know I said it before, but I want to thank staff for all the hard work. From day one, I've been very encouraged with the staff that's on board. Corinne has been, doing yeoman's work, working way beyond any reasonable expectation. And Maria has been right by her side the whole time. So I've been just kind of like steering the ship, if you will, a little bit, but they've been doing the work, and I think they should be recognized for that hard work.
Thank you, guys. With that, you're on.
Hopefully you have all received your binders tonight.
I just got it. Snazzy.
Maria, if you can go on to the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Eric is also consulting with IT.
Thank you. And you can probably make it full page.
Have to do it like a slideshow, and then it'll populate the whole.
Look at that little button in the bottom corner right next to this.
Yeah, that one.
This one?
Thank you.
You're hired, Eric. Thank you.
Corinne Elliott, Assistant Finance Director for the record. Tonight we're presenting to you all of the backup documentation as far as the line item details that go behind all of the Stantec models that you've received and that we've gone over. In addition, this front page is kind of a summary recap of the total requested budget for 2019. As you can see, for 2019, the total overall budget is coming in right around $204 million. That's down almost $11.3 million from last year. A good portion of that is due to the internal service funds. Primarily during 18, we got hit with both Irma and Matthew. So it took major hits on our self-insurance fund. So that's a good chunk of the difference in the internal service funds. In addition, the other biggest area that the change is occurring in is within the capital projects. And again, a lot of that has to do with just the timing of when the contracts were signed and when we had to issue the POs and things along that nature. At the back of inside your book, you will find the detail for all of the major funds that we have covered through Stantec. And in the very back of it, you will find the CIP plan broken out with the 5-year schedules. In addition to that, we've also included the 5-year CIP, or the current year CIP, showing you the actual funding source so that you can see whether it's capital related, was being done by borrowing, fund balance, basically the funding source to go ahead and take care of those costs. So this is basically the budget. Do you have anything to add to that? Are there any questions?
The only thing I just wanted to bring forward, I know that a lot of people don't know, but I have had the Mayor's Education Council for the last several years, and it's been our first attempt as a city to actually have an ongoing correspondence with the schools and the teachers and the principals and things of that nature. And we're going to be having a meeting coming up soon where we have representatives there. One of the biggest things we've been lacking as a city, there was a budget item in for a reading. I think it was listed as a literary something or
Literacy coordinator.
literacy coordinator.
130.
It was 130,000 or whatever it was. I just wanted to clarify because I've had some people ask me about that. Number one, I think this is something we should look towards in the coming year, in next year's budget. But not just, I just want to clarify, it's not just as a literacy coordinator, but as an education liaison, handling all school matters so that we can work on multiple programs and multiple projects, not just reading, but other obstacles and things that we face and that we have to supply and do for our schools. Other cities have them. I know they're much more advanced and evolved budget-wise than we are. But as we make decisions to become a community of choice, just like we have to become an organization of choice, we have to focus on our schools and our kids and our families. And we have to make sure that we are doing everything we can education-wise to support our local schools and our family. We've got so many new families moving into this neighborhood and so many, young kids that are entering the system, and we have challenges beyond most other communities. So I'm gonna just use my moment because I know you've said things before in the past too, and I'm sure you have a lot to say about this as well. But I just want to say that this is, we've been evolving and taking on more each year. This is a step that needs to be taken. I understand how we've struggled and these ballot initiatives and the homestead tax, and I understand what we're going through, and I've never asked you to step out of your comfort zone when it comes to that. But this next step is something that we need as a community. The schools need to be the top part of our priority as well, and we need to focus on that as we rebuild our community into a city that people really want to live, work, and play in. And we already know it's great, but as people move here, we want to make sure that our schools are really good. So I want to thank you for your continued support, commissioners. In that matter, I'm willing to step away knowing the realities of it. You can't, get blood from a stone, but I just hope that we can look at that next year for budgeting.
Next year.
Next year.
And our children's education is infrastructure. And I would love to, next year, be able to incentivize to get all our schools at A rating. I know the rating system is a little screwy, but if we can make a difference in the grade levels of our rating system, I think it would be a fantastic investment.
And if perhaps the homestead exemption doesn't pass, I'd like to ask my fellow commissioners to consider that as a change or a budget amendment, should that we have people have an epiphany and realize that.
I think the three of us here are in agreement that education is key to changing the face of Lake Worth.
Thank you.
Commissioner looking Harding? Forward to next year.
Madam Mayor and Commissioner Robinson, and this is a question I'll pose to you, if you could find a way to support education in the city without the city having to pay for that long term, would that be something that either of you would be interested in?
Of course, as long as it could be, as long as there could be consistency to whatever it is. I wouldn't want it to be a stop in, a drop in. We've got a lot of people through grants that will do a program here or a program there to have a consistency.
So I wasn't going to talk about this until much later, until about November when we have our joint meeting with the school district. But an idea that I've been talking about with staff and we've been trying to work out is a way to attack teacher quality, right? And, how would you fund something like that, right? So basically, we have this thing called a Sustainable Bonus Incentive Program, a program that William wrote. And it requires developers, if they want to get extra height and things like that, they have to make changes to their projects that cost them money, right? And the wonderful thing about that program is that it gives the developers the choice, right? They get to choose from a menu of things that they can do. And at the end of the day, it's going to cost them money, and that's why we give them the bonus in height or FAR or whatever it is that we give them. And what we realize is that, those things have value. We could just give the developer the ability to write us a check if that's something that they would choose. So rather than making $600,000 worth of changes to your project, you could just write us a check of an amount, right? And we could then use that check for educational programming, right? And that's something that I think we should explore over the next few months. The Sustainable Bonus Incentive Program is a part of the comprehensive plan. It will require a comp plan amendment to give developers the option to do that. In addition to that, it is a part of our code, and we would obviously have to run both of those changes through the Historic Resources Preservation Board and the Planning and Zoning Board. But I think that that's something that we can do, and in particular, our schools have, as I see it, 3 problems. We have a kindergarten readiness issue that Board Member Whitfield has discussed ad nauseum. We have an overcapacity issue that can be solved relatively quickly now that the spotlight is on that problem. In a single cycle of the Advisory Boundary Committee, over the school year, that can be addressed. And then the other thing is teacher quality. And, what the research shows is that teacher quality tends to overpower some of the demographic issues that we might have going on in our schools, right? So if a child is coming to school with issues that are occurring outside of the school, what we know is that a really, really fantastic teacher can compensate for some of that and get results. And so, again, over the next few months, I'll be releasing a plan to address teacher quality. I've already sent some emails. If you would like to receive emails that I've been talking with Mr. City Manager. Fortunately, I haven't been emailing you, but I've been emailing you through the City Manager and William and Mark Stivers if you're interested in more about that.
Can we have access, if it's gonna be something we're voting on, we can.
That's essential.
Well, if it's a public document, and I've mentioned it in public.
We'll check on that.
Yeah. It's been mentioned.
No, I'm looking
It's
forward
been
to
mentioned
hearing all this.
publicly now.
Anything that helps us in regards to this category, I'm all for, so
I
I'm looking
would,
forward to it.
I would suggest that when we have our workshop scheduling in the next month or two, that education is one of the topics that we're picking up. I know we have the one we're scheduling with the school district members and y'all in full workshop, but to talk about some of these maybe before then, that way y'all can hash out all the implications, the timelines, the funding sources, and the impact, as well as the other items that you're talking about. Because remember, coming out of the strategic planning discussion that you had here, the quality of education in our schools was one of your focuses. So this is right in line with one of those strategic planning discussion areas. So it makes a lot of sense. It's
I'm
just,
also gonna be holding off on the Mayor's Education Council meeting, just to let everyone know, people at home. It normally would be in September, but I'm gonna move it to November, just so that we can have a chance to have all of our meetings first, so that when I put together an agenda with the principals and whatnot, we can include anything that's come up for that.
Madam Mayor, if I'm hearing direction then from y'all to me to bring this discussion forward,
Yes,
I'll go ahead and work with staff on scheduling that, and then we can hone in on direction.
perfect. I'm in.
Fantastic.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? You've got to do it. Second. All those in favor state so by saying aye. Aye. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, staff. Wonderful job.
Thank you, staff.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Fab.